The night was quiet in the little valley of Arendelle, a place where the grass rolled out like velvet beneath silver moonlight, and the streams ran so softly they seemed to whisper lullabies to the stones. Nestled within this valley was a cottage, simple and warm, with smoke curling gently from its chimney and lantern lights spilling across the garden path. Inside, a young traveler named Elion stirred from sleep. He had always felt there was something beyond the valley, a gentle pull like a voice calling from the horizon. Though his life in Arendelle was peaceful, his heart often drifted to thoughts of distant forests, hidden mountains, and the mysteries of starlit paths. That evening, after the embers in the hearth had dimmed, Elion stepped outside. The air was cool, kissed with the fragrance of wild lavender and pine. Above, the night sky stretched endlessly, filled with constellations that seemed brighter than he had ever seen before. And in that stillness, Elion felt it, the call of the forest, soft yet undeniable, like the first note of a song waiting to be sung. He began to walk, not hurriedly, but with the slow, thoughtful pace of one who listens to the world. His boots pressed lightly into the earth, and each step carried him farther from his cottage, deeper into the embrace of night. Fireflies rose like drifting sparks among the trees, guiding him toward the edge of the forest where ancient oaks stood tall and silent, their branches arched together like guardians at a gate. As Elion crossed into the woods, the air grew cooler and rich with the scent of moss and rain. The moonlight filtered through the canopy, painting soft silver patterns across the forest floor. The path beneath him was faint but steady, winding between roots and stones, carrying him deeper into the unknown. Yet nothing felt frightening here, only calm, as though the forest itself welcomed him. Soon, he came upon a clearing. At its center stood a great stone, weathered by time, its surface carved with runes that glowed faintly like embers hidden beneath ash. Elion reached out, tracing the symbols with his fingers, and in that moment, a warmth spread through his hand and into his heart. The runes whispered, though not in words, but in feelings, gentle encouragement, quiet reassurance. The journey ahead would be long, but he was not alone. Around the stone, wildflowers swayed, though no wind stirred them. Their petals shimmered with colors more vivid than any he had known, blues that glowed like starlight, and purples as deep as twilight itself. Elion sat for a moment, breathing in the stillness, listening to the hum of the earth beneath him. Every detail seemed alive. The rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the soft trickle of a hidden brook. From the shadows emerged a figure. It was not a person, but a deer, tall and graceful, with antlers that seemed to hold fragments of the night sky. Tiny lights, like stars themselves, shimmered between the branches of its crown. The deer regarded Elion with calm eyes, unafraid, and then turned slowly, stepping toward another path that led deeper into the forest. Elion understood. This was his guide. He rose to his feet, following the deer. Each step brought new sights, the roots of trees coiling like sleeping dragons, mushrooms glowing with pale green light, and stones carved long ago by hands unknown. The air seemed to hum with memory, as if the forest itself remembered every traveler who had ever passed through its depths. The deer led him to a brook, its waters glistening in the moonlight. The sound was soft, melodic, like a harp played in the distance. Elion knelt beside it, cupping his hands to drink. The water was cool and refreshing, carrying with it a clarity that eased the weariness from his body. As he drank, he felt his thoughts still, his heart slow, as though the brook carried away all burdens of the day. The deer lingered on the far bank, waiting patiently. Its glowing antlers cast faint light upon the trees, enough to guide Elion forward. He crossed carefully, stepping on stones that rose just above the water's surface, and when he reached the other side, the forest seemed to change. The trees grew taller, their trunks wider, their branches weaving a canopy so high, it seemed like a cathedral of wood and leaf. The air was filled with a quiet reverence, a sense of stepping into a place sacred and timeless. Here, the path widened, lined with ferns that glowed faintly as though touched by moonlight. At the heart of this great wood, They came to a second clearing. In the center lay a pool of water so still it perfectly mirrored the stars above, as though sky and earth had met. The deer stepped to the edge, lowering its head as if in offering. Elyon sat beside the pool, gazing into its depths. He saw more than just his reflection. Shapes drifted in the water mountains, crowned with snow, rivers winding through golden plains, distant seas that shimmered beneath sunlit skies. It was a vision of the journey ahead, though only fragments, glimpses of a road yet traveled. Elyon felt no fear, only calm. The world was vast, yes, but it was also beautiful. And this journey was not one of conquest or battle, it was one of discovery, of walking gently through places where silence and wonder dwelled side by side. The deer lifted its head, and for a moment, Elyon thought he saw words written in the glow of its antlers. Follow the path, and the world will open. With a soft step, the deer moved back into the forest. Elyon rose and followed once more, carrying with him the vision of the pool and the quiet promise of the journey unfolding. And so, beneath the endless stars and the gentle canopy of leaves, the hero's journey began not with the clash of swords or the roar of battle, but with the soft footsteps of a traveler guided by light, walking deeper into the night's embrace. The forest deepened as Elyon followed the deer, its starlit antlers shimmering like lanterns in the night. Each step drew him farther from the familiar, yet closer to something he could not name, something that felt as old as the world itself. The trees grew so tall that their crowns vanished into the dark sky, and their trunks were so wide that moss and ivy formed entire little gardens upon them, alive with tiny blossoms and silver-veined leaves. The air was hushed, filled with the distant rhythm of the earth. It was not silence exactly, but a layered stillness made of soft things, the faint sigh of the wind weaving through branches, the quiet drip of dew falling from leaf to leaf, the muffled stir of creatures moving gently in their hidden burrows. Elyon felt the forest wrapping around him like a great, living cloak. Though he did not know the way, the path seemed to form itself before him, glowing faintly underfoot as though the very soil wished to guide him onward. The deer walked with ease, pausing now and again to look back, its calm gaze assuring him that he was exactly where he was meant to be. They came to a glade unlike any other Elyon had seen. At its heart stood a circle of stones, tall and weathered, their surfaces smooth as though polished by centuries of rain. They formed a ring, and within that ring, the air shimmered faintly, like sunlight bending over water. The deer stopped just short of the stones, lowering its head. Elyon stepped closer, drawn by the strange glow. As he did, the air around him shifted. A sound rose not of music, yet not quite of words. It was an echo, soft and gentle, like a voice calling from far away. He stood within the circle, and suddenly the whispers grew clearer. It was his own voice. Fragments of his life drifted on the air, the laughter of his childhood, the quiet songs his mother used to hum while tending the fire, the promises he once whispered to the stars when he dreamed of journeys yet to come. The circle of stones held memories, not just his, but echoes of every traveler who had ever passed through this path. Their stories lingered, etched into the very air. The forest did not keep them as burdens, but as songs, preserved in its living memory. Elyon closed his eyes and let the echoes wash over him. He felt them as warmth, as comfort, as gentle reminders that, though he walked alone in body, he was part of something much greater, threads of countless journeys weaving into one endless tapestry. When he opened his eyes, he saw that the deer was watching him, patient as ever. Its antlers glowed a little brighter now, reflecting in the smooth surfaces of the stones. Elyon stepped carefully from the circle, and the echoes faded, leaving only the calm hush of the forest night. They moved onward, and soon the air began to change. The scent of pine deepened, joined by a cool breath that hinted of flowing water. The path led them to a great ravine where a river cascaded down in a long, silken ribbon, glowing pale blue beneath the starlight. The waterfall did not roar, it sang. Its sound was low and soothing, as though the river wished not to disturb the peace of the woods but to add its voice to the lullaby of the night. Mist rose from the falls, drifting like soft clouds, carrying with it the shimmer of moonlight. Tiny rainbow arcs flickered in the mist, delicate and fleeting. Elian sat upon a stone near the water's edge, watching droplets gather on the moss before rolling into the stream below. The deer bowed its head to drink, and Elian followed. The water here tasted different, cooler, more alive, as though carrying the breath of the stars themselves. He felt a quiet strength fill him, not the kind that urged him to act, but the kind that allowed him to rest, to be still, to feel deeply. For a long while he lingered there. The waterfall's voice lulled him into a gentle calm, and he felt his thoughts drift like leaves upon the current. When he rose again, the deer had already begun to move. This time, the path led upward, winding along the edge of the ravine. They climbed slowly, the slope gentle, lined with roots that formed natural steps. As they ascended, the trees began to thin, opening to glimpses of the horizon. At last, they reached a hilltop where the forest parted completely. Before them stretched a wide expanse of meadow, bathed in silver light. The grass rippled in the breeze like a sea of pale green silk, and scattered throughout were clusters of night-blooming flowers, glowing softly as though each petal had captured a fragment of the moon. Elian stepped into the meadow, his breath caught in wonder. The stars above shone unbroken now, an endless ocean of light, mirrored by the blossoms at his feet. It felt as though he walked between two skies, the heavens above and the earth's reflection below. The deer moved to the center of the meadow and stopped. Slowly, its glowing antlers dimmed until only the faintest trace of light remained. Elian understood it was time for him to walk onward alone. The creature bowed its head once more, a gesture of farewell, before turning and fading back into the shadows of the forest. For a long while, Elian stood there, watching, until the last glimmer of its starlit crown was gone. The meadow was quiet now, but not empty. A gentle breeze moved through the flowers, carrying their fragrance like a soft perfume of honey and rain. The sound was soothing, the kind of sound that lulled the heart into stillness. Elian lay back upon the grass, gazing at the stars. His journey had barely begun, yet he felt already transformed. He understood now that the road ahead was not one of haste or conquest, but of listening, of walking gently, of discovering what had always been waiting. And so, beneath the endless constellations and the whisper of flowers swaying in the night, the hero rested, cradled by the calm expanse of the world, with the promise of dawn still far away. The meadow stretched on and on, a quiet ocean of pale blossoms swaying under starlight. Elian walked slowly, each step sinking into grass that felt softer than any bed of moss. The air was cool, filled with the faint perfume of night-blooming jasmine, carrying whispers of sweetness with every breath. Above, constellations shimmered in endless patterns, their light brushing the meadow in a silver glow. For a time, Elian let the world carry him. There was no need to hurry. The journey felt less like a task to complete and more like a rhythm to follow, like drifting along a gentle current. The forest lay behind him, a dark wall of trees, while ahead the meadow seemed to rise toward a faint glow on the horizon. As he walked, he noticed the flowers responding to his steps. When his boots pressed into the grass, the blossoms nearby shivered softly, releasing a glow that lingered, marking his path in a delicate ribbon of light. It was as though the meadow itself was painting his journey across its surface, recording each step as a star among many. The sound of the waterfall had faded, replaced by a deeper hush, the sound of open space, where wind moved freely and time seemed slower. Occasionally, the breeze shifted, carrying with it the faintest notes of music, too soft to name. It might have been the rustling of flowers, or perhaps something more, a hidden song woven into the air. At last, Elian came to the far edge of the meadow, where the land descended into a wide ravine. The drop was steep, its depths veiled in mist that glowed faintly, as though the moonlight itself had gathered there to rest. Across the ravine lay another rise of land, crowned with strange, shimmering trees whose branches glittered like crystal. Spanning the gap was a bridge. It was not made of stone or wood, but of light. Threads of starlight arched gracefully from one side to the other, weaving themselves into a pathway that glowed with a soft, silver radiance. The bridge seemed impossibly delicate, yet steady, as though it had existed long before Elyon ever set eyes upon it. He paused, standing at the edge. A gentle unease stirred in his chest, not fear, but reverence. This was no ordinary crossing. It was a threshold, a passage from the known world into something deeper, more mysterious. The air grew still. The flowers behind him ceased their glowing ripple, as though waiting. Ahead, the bridge gleamed, inviting yet solemn. Elyon stepped forward. The moment his foot touched the bridge, the starlight rippled beneath him, like water disturbed by a pebble. Each step he took caused the light to respond, glowing brighter for an instant before settling again into calm radiance. The bridge made no sound under his weight. It was like walking upon moonbeams, each step lighter than air. As he reached the midpoint, Elyon paused to look down. Below, the mist swirled slowly, revealing glimpses of something vast. He thought he saw fragments of landscapes, mountains stretching to the horizon, seas rolling endlessly, cities of light and shadow. The ravine seemed not to hold earth but possibility, a tapestry of visions shimmering far beneath. The wind brushed his face, cool and steady, and he felt the world pause around him. Then, from the mist, a voice rose. It was not loud but soft, as though carried on the breeze. The words were ancient, yet he understood them not through sound but through feeling. Every step you take is a choice, and every choice shapes the path ahead. Walk gently, for the world listens. Elyon bowed his head, letting the words settle in his heart. He stepped forward again, the bridge glowing brighter beneath his feet, as though acknowledging his resolve. When at last he reached the far side, the air shifted. The mist behind him quieted, and the land before him opened wide. He stepped off the bridge and into a grove of crystalline trees. The grove shimmered in moonlight. Each tree was slender and tall, its bark translucent like glass, filled with faint veins of glowing silver. Their branches arched gracefully, and where leaves should have been, there hung clusters of crystals that chimed softly in the breeze. The sound was delicate, like wind chimes in a dream, soothing and endlessly gentle. Elyon touched the trunk of one tree. It was cool beneath his hand, humming faintly with a life that was not of wood but of light itself. As he walked deeper into the grove, the crystals overhead swayed, their tones weaving together into a melody that seemed meant just for him. The ground was soft with moss that glowed faintly underfoot. Pools of water collected between the roots, reflecting the shimmering canopy above so perfectly that it felt as though he walked among stars both above and below. At the center of the grove stood a fountain. It was not carved but grown, its basin formed from the living roots of the crystalline trees, curving upward to hold a pool of water that glowed softly from within. The fountain's surface was perfectly still, save for a single trickle of water that rose from its center and fell again in an endless, soothing rhythm. Elyon sat beside it, listening. The sound was not like the river's song or the waterfall's lullaby. It was slower, steadier, like the heartbeat of the world itself. He closed his eyes and let the sound carry him. Visions drifted across his thoughts, wide fields where golden grain swayed in sunlight, mountains where the wind carried voices of long-forgotten travelers, seas that held horizons without end. None of it was urgent. None of it demanded action. It was simply there, waiting, patient as the stars. When he opened his eyes again, he noticed something he had not before. The fountain's water had shifted, and upon its surface lay a faint reflection of himself. But it was not the Elyon who had left the cottage in Arendelle. This reflection showed him standing taller, his eyes steady with quiet wisdom, his hands carrying a staff carved from wood and light. He seemed older, not in years, but in understanding, as though this journey was slowly shaping him into someone new. Elyon touched the surface of the water, and the reflection rippled, fading back into soft light. The grove remained quiet, its crystalline trees chiming faintly, their song blending with the gentle rhythm of the fountain. Elyon lay back upon the moss, gazing upward through the shimmering branches. Stars blinked faintly through the canopy, mingling with the glow of crystals. until it was impossible to tell where sky ended and the grove began. He felt the weight of the day drift away. His journey was only beginning, but in this moment, there was only rest, only peace, only the endless soothing music of the grove. And as sleep brushed the edge of his mind, he realized something. This journey was not just about reaching faraway lands. It was about listening, about being still, about letting the world unfold in its own quiet rhythm. Elyon lingered in the crystalline grove until the air grew lighter, as though dawn might be nearing. Yet when he looked up, the stars still filled the sky, unwavering and eternal. Here, time seemed softer, stretched thin like silk, moving not in hours or minutes but in breaths and heartbeats. When he finally rose, the fountain hummed quietly, bidding him farewell with its steady song. He touched the moss one last time, feeling its cool glow beneath his fingers, before stepping back onto the faint path that wound between the crystal trees. The chimes of the branches followed him, fading slowly as he walked deeper into the night. Beyond the grove, the land opened into rolling hills blanketed with silver grass. Each hill was gentle, curving like waves, carrying him upward and downward in a rhythm that reminded him of the sea he had glimpsed in his visions. Fireflies drifted among the grasses, their tiny lights swaying as if keeping time with some hidden lullaby. At the crest of one hill, Elyon stopped. From here he could see far into the distance, where the horizon shimmered faintly as though waiting with secrets yet revealed. But closer, upon the next hill, he noticed movement figures walking slowly, their forms lit by the soft glow of lanterns. Elyon descended carefully, the grass brushing against his hands as he moved. As he neared, the figures became clearer. They were not like him, yet neither were they strangers. The first was tall and slender, cloaked in robes the color of twilight. Their face was hidden by a hood, but light flickered faintly within, as if their very being was woven of dusk and starlight. In their hands, they carried a lantern, its flame steady and golden, casting circles of warmth upon the grass. Beside them walked a smaller figure, no taller than Elyon's shoulder, with hair that shimmered like threads of silver. Their steps were light, and in their hands they carried a staff of smooth wood, topped with a spiral of glowing crystal. Where the staff touched the earth, flowers stirred awake, blooming quietly before closing again as they passed. The third companion was unlike the others entirely. It was an animal, a great bird with wings that glowed faintly, as though dusted with moonlight. Its feathers shifted from silver to pale blue as it moved, and its eyes were calm pools of deep, endless sky. It walked beside the others not as a beast, but as an equal, each step graceful and sure. When they noticed Elyon, they did not startle or question. They simply paused, waiting as though they had been expecting him all along. The lantern-bearer lifted their head, and though Elyon could not see their face clearly, he felt warmth emanate from them, an unspoken welcome, gentle and kind. "You have crossed the bridge," the voice came, low and melodic, like the rustle of wind through tall grass. "And so you walk with us." Elyon nodded, feeling no need to ask who they were or why they traveled. It was enough to know they were companions, woven into this journey as naturally as stars into the night. They began walking together, their pace unhurried. The lantern lit the path in soft gold, blending with the silver light of the fireflies. The smaller figure hummed quietly, a tune without words, and the flowers stirred faintly as if listening. The great bird spread its wings once, sending ripples of light across the hills, then folded them again in calm. Elyon felt his heart ease in their presence. Alone, the path had been vast and endless, but with them, it felt like a shared dream. They did not speak often, yet their silence was companionable, filled with understanding rather than emptiness. As they traveled, the hills gave way to a valley where streams wound like silver ribbons. They crossed shallow waters that sang softly over smooth stones, their reflections mingling with the lantern's glow. At times, they paused to rest beneath willows whose branches hung low, shimmering faintly in the starlight. During one such pause, the smaller figure turned to Elyon. Their eyes were bright, like clear pools reflecting moonlight. "The world is wide," they said softly, "and each traveler sees it in their own way. What you carry in your heart will shape what lies ahead." Elyon listened, letting the words sink into him like seeds pressed into fertile soil. He did not yet know what he carried, but he felt certain that in time, it would become clear. The bird shifted beside them, lowering its head so Elyon could see his reflection in its eyes. For a moment, he thought he glimpsed something himself, walking farther down the path, surrounded by companions yet unseen, carrying a staff that pulsed with quiet light. Then the vision faded, leaving only the calm gaze of the creature, vast and steady. When they rose again to continue, the valley slowly narrowed. The grasses grew taller, the streams fewer, until at last the path led into a canyon carved by time. Its walls rose high, streaked with silver veins that glimmered faintly like threads of light sewn into stone. The air grew cooler, and their footsteps echoed softly, blending with the faint trickle of unseen water. The lantern's glow guided them deeper into the canyon, where the ceiling of stars grew distant and hidden. Yet even in the narrow passages, the calm remained. Crystals embedded in the stone glowed faintly, their light pale and steady, illuminating the way like fallen fragments of the moon. At last, they emerged into a chamber where the canyon widened. Here, a pool of water lay still, mirroring the faint glow of crystals overhead. The companions gathered near its edge, and for a time, they simply sat, listening to the slow drip of water into the pool. Elyon closed his eyes and breathed deeply. He could feel the rhythm of the journey settling into him, steady as a heartbeat. The path ahead was unknown, but in this moment, it did not matter. The lantern-bearer placed their light beside the pool, its flames steady and golden. The smaller figure dipped their staff into the water, sending ripples outward in widening circles. The bird ruffled its feathers, releasing a faint shimmer of light that drifted upward like sparks before fading into the canyon's ceiling. Together, they rested, and in the calm embrace of that chamber, Elyon felt it again, that quiet truth the forest had whispered from the very beginning. This journey was not about rushing, but about being, about listening, about walking gently through the dream of the world. The pool at the canyon's heart shimmered faintly, its surface so still it looked like polished glass. For a long while, Elyon and his companions simply remained there, listening to the quiet drip of water echoing from unseen heights. Each sound lingered, stretching into silence, as though the cavern wished to hold on to every note. When at last they rose to continue, the lantern's flame seemed to shift of its own accord, guiding them along a narrow passage carved into the canyon wall. The path wound gently downward, its walls close and smooth, veined with faint threads of light that pulsed as though alive. Their footsteps made no sound, absorbed by the stone itself. As they descended, the air grew cooler, carrying the scent of damp earth and minerals, a fragrance deep and grounding. The great bird's feathers glowed softly in the darkness, casting pale light upon the walls, while the smaller figure's staff added a gentle crystal gleam. The canyon's lantern-bearer walked silently at the front, their golden light steady, unwavering. After what felt like both moments and hours, the passage opened into a vast chamber. It was unlike anything Elyon had ever seen. The space stretched wide and high, its ceiling lost in darkness. At the center lay a great expanse of water, perfectly still, so clear it reflected the companions as though they stood upon a mirror. Around the water's edge, smooth stone rose in soft terraces, each one lined with faintly glowing moss. Crystals hung like stalactites from the unseen ceiling, dripping water in slow, rhythmic drops that rippled the surface below. The chamber glowed with calm. The air was cool and unmoving, carrying only the sound of the slow drip, the sound of time made liquid. It felt less like a cavern and more like a sanctuary, a place where the world itself paused to breathe. The companions approached the water's edge. The lantern-bearer placed their light upon the stone, its reflection doubling upon the mirrored surface. The smaller figure knelt, dipping their hand into the water. The ripples spread outward, shimmering with faint colors, as though the pool held not just reflection but memory light, and song. Elyon leaned closer. Within the depths, he thought he saw visions, shapes of forests, mountains, meadows, and skies. But unlike the fountain of the grove, which had shown fragments of his journey ahead, this pool seemed to show the world itself, all woven together. It was as though every stream, every hill, every star had been gathered here, held within its endless stillness. The bird lowered its head, its beak grazing the water's surface. For a moment, the chamber filled with faint light, as if the pool had recognized the touch. Circles of brightness spread across the water, and within them, images appeared not of places, but of feelings: peace, wonder, belonging. Elyon closed his eyes, letting the images flow through him. He felt his heart ease, as though the weight of questions he had carried since leaving his cottage could finally rest. He did not need to know everything. He did not need to hold the answers yet. The path itself was enough. The lantern-bearer spoke, their voice low and resonant, echoing gently through the chamber. This place is the sanctuary of still waters. Here, the world remembers itself. Every river and stream finds its beginning here, and every drop carries within it the memory of its journey. Sit, traveler, and listen not with your ears, but with your heart. Elyon obeyed. He sat upon the stone terrace, closing his eyes once more. The dripping water became a rhythm, slow and steady, like the ticking of a clock that had no urgency. With each drop, he felt himself sink deeper into calm. The smaller figure's song began again, a wordless hum that wove with the rhythm of the drops. It rose and fell like the tide, gentle and soothing, wrapping the chamber in layers of sound as soft as velvet. The bird joined in not with song, but with the faint rustle of feathers, a sound like wind moving through high places. Together, the sounds became a lullaby. Elyon's thoughts drifted, not away, but deeper, into a place where memory, dream, and present blended into one. He felt again the warmth of his childhood hearth, the pull of the forest on that first night, the quiet guidance of the deer with starlit antlers. All of it was here, within him, part of him. Time passed, though Elyon could not have said how much. It might have been hours. It might have been moments. When he finally opened his eyes, the water had stilled again. The visions had faded, leaving only the clear reflection of the chamber. His companions were quiet beside him, their presence steady and grounding. The lantern-bearer lifted their flame once more. "The sanctuary has given you its gift," they said softly. "The gift of rest, of remembering that the path is not rushed, but walked in its own time. Carry this stillness with you, for the road ahead will open slowly, like the petals of a flower." Elyon nodded. He felt the truth of their words not as instruction, but as a seed planted within him. It would grow as he walked, watered by silence and patience. They rose together and began to leave the chamber, their reflections trailing behind them upon the water. The narrow passage awaited, winding gently upward, leading them back toward the world above. As they climbed, Elyon looked back one last time. The sanctuary glowed faintly in the distance, its still waters holding their eternal silence. He knew he would carry that silence within him now, no matter how far the path stretched. And as the passage narrowed, the sounds of dripping water faded, replaced once more by the steady rhythm of his companion's steps. The world waited above, wider, brighter, and filled with mysteries yet unseen. But within him, a sanctuary would always remain, a place of calm to return to in heart and memory. The passage sloped upward, winding slowly until the air grew warmer and the faint scent of open grass reached them once again. At last, the narrow walls of the canyon gave way, and the travelers stepped into the open world. Before them stretched a plain that seemed to go on forever. The sky above was neither night nor day, but a soft twilight that shimmered with both stars and a distant glow, as though the horizon itself held a hidden Sunday. The light was gentle, casting everything in hues of lavender and silver, with occasional ripples of gold that drifted across the sky like slow-moving waves. The grass of the plain was tall and soft, bending in the wind like a sea of silk. Scattered among it were flowers that glowed faintly in shades of pale blue and ivory, their petals opening and closing as though breathing. The air was filled with the sound of the breeze moving through the plain, a steady hush that rose and fell like the tide. The companions paused at the edge of the canyon, taking in the vastness before them. The lantern-bearer lifted their light, and its golden flame mingled with the silver hues of twilight, casting a warm circle around them. The great bird stretched its wings once, their tips catching the shifting light like ribbons of fire. "This is the plain of endless twilight," the lantern-bearer said softly. Their voice carried on the wind, blending with it. "Here, the horizon is never reached, for the plain is not a place of distance, but of reflection. Those who walk here do not seek to arrive, but to understand." Elyon felt the words sink into him like roots pressing into soil. The plain did not frighten him, though it was endless. Instead, it comforted him, a reminder that not all journeys were measured in steps or in miles. Some journeys unfolded within the heart. Together, they began to walk. The grasses swayed around them, their soft movement creating ripples that spread outward with every step. The flowers glowed faintly, leaning toward the companions as though acknowledging their presence. Above, the twilight sky shifted slowly, constellations appearing and disappearing as though carried on invisible tides. At times, Elyon thought he saw shapes upon the horizon, distant trees, hills, even towers of stone, but when he blinked, they softened into mist, like dreams dissolving at dawn. The plain was not meant to be grasped, only experienced. As they walked, Elyon noticed something curious. His shadow stretched long upon the grass, yet it was not the shadow of who he was now. It showed him standing taller, carrying a staff of light, like the one he had glimpsed in the sanctuary's reflection. The smaller figure's shadow shimmered and changed too, shifting between childlike playfulness and quiet wisdom. Even the lantern-bearer's shadow revealed glimpses an unhooded face that glowed with starlight, though Elyon could not hold its shape for long. The great bird's shadow rose vast and winged, stretching farther than the plain itself, as though it was not bound by earth but soared endlessly through sky and beyond. Elyon watched these shifting shapes with wonder. The plain, it seemed, revealed not what was, but what might be, what lived quietly within each heart. As the twilight deepened, they came upon a small rise where the grasses parted. At its crest lay a circle of stones, much like the one Elyon had found in the first forest clearing, but older, smoother, worn almost to nothing by wind and time. Within the circle grew a single tree, its branches twisted and bare, yet glowing faintly with threads of silver light. The companions paused. The lantern-bearer set their flame upon the ground, and together they sat within the stone circle. The smaller figure pressed their staff into the soil, and immediately the grass around them stirred, blooming into flowers that cast a soft glow. The bird folded its wings, lowering itself gracefully to the earth. Elyon sat as well, gazing at the tree. Though it bore no leaves, the tree pulsed faintly, as though light flowed slowly through its veins. Its branches reached outward, curling against the twilight sky, and Elyon thought it looked less like a dying tree and more like a sleeping one. The lantern-bearer spoke, their voice deep and steady. "This is the Tree of Waiting. It has stood here since before the plain had a name. It bears no fruit, for its gift is not in what it gives, but in what it teaches, patience, and the strength found in stillness." The smaller figure added, their tone light and gentle, "When the time is right, the tree blooms. But no one can hasten its flowers. To sit here is to learn that all things unfold in their own season." Elyon touched the stone beside him, feeling its cool surface warmed faintly by the lantern's glow. He breathed deeply, and for a time, they all sat in silence, listening to the wind move through the grasses and the distant hum of the twilight sky. As he watched, Elyon thought he saw the faintest shimmer upon the branches, tiny buds, glistening like stars. He could not be certain, for when he blinked, they faded again, leaving only silver veins glowing softly. But he felt no disappointment. Instead, he felt calm, knowing that the tree's time was not his to decide. They remained there until the lantern's flame flickered faintly, not as if it were failing, but as if it were breathing. The lantern-bearer lifted it once more, and the companions rose together. The plain stretched endlessly ahead, its twilight unchanged, yet Elion felt subtly different. Sitting by the tree of waiting had planted something within him, not an answer, but a patience, a trust in the journey's rhythm. As they walked onward, the grasses whispered around them, and the sky shifted slowly, carrying new constellations across its endless dome. Somewhere far off, a line of glowing hills shimmered like a dream just out of reach, and Elion knew they would walk toward it not to arrive, but to continue. And so they moved deeper into the plain of endless twilight, their footsteps steady, their silence companionable, the world around them unfolding like a lullaby without end. The companions moved on, their footsteps soft against the swaying grasses of the plain of endless twilight. Time felt like water here, flowing without edges or measure. Hours might have passed, or only moments, yet none of them felt weary. The plain itself seemed to cradle them in its calm, carrying them forward on a tide of quiet rhythm. Ahead, the faint glow of the hills grew stronger. What had first seemed like a mirage now shimmered steadily, their slopes lined with soft light that pulsed gently, as though the hills themselves were breathing. Each rise glowed not from the reflection of the sky, but from within, as if their stones were made of slumbering stars. The closer they came, the more the air seemed to hum with a subtle harmony. It was not a song in the way Elion understood, but a resonance that settled in the chest and bones, soothing like the memory of a lullaby once sung in childhood. The bird tilted its head upward, its silver-feathered breast glimmering. "The hills of gentle light," it murmured in a voice like wind through leaves. "Here the world remembers every step that has been taken, every silence that has been kept. The hills are made not of stone alone, but of memory." Elion gazed in awe. As they approached the base of the first hill, he noticed how the glowing stones were carved with faint markings. Some spiraled like seashells, some stretched in winding lines, others bloomed outward like stars. When he touched one gently, warmth spread through his palm, and for a moment he saw not the hill, but a memory himself walking the forest path, the hush of the sanctuary, the circle of stones. Then the vision faded, leaving only the stone's soft pulse beneath his fingers. The lantern-bearer set their light upon the ground once more. "The hills are not meant to be climbed with haste," they said quietly. "Each step offers its own reflection, and the path is best taken slowly, as one might walk through a dream." So they began to ascend. The grasses thinned, replaced by glowing moss that cushioned their feet. The slope was gentle, never steep, and each stone along the way seemed to guide them upward like a lantern on the ground. Their shadows followed, long and soft, mingling with the glow so that Elion felt less like he was climbing and more like he was being carried. At intervals, small alcoves opened within the hill, as though it offered resting places along the way. In one, a pool of still water reflected the twilight sky. Yet when Elion peered into it, he saw not only the stars above, but the faces of his companions beside him, clear and calm. The smaller figure leaned over the pool too, and for a moment, their reflection was that of a grown traveler, steady and wise, before shifting back to their youthful form. They smiled at Elion knowingly, and he felt warmth in his chest. In another alcove, a cluster of glowing flowers swayed as if stirred by invisible hands. Their petals shed faint sparks of light that rose gently into the air, like fireflies. The bird lowered its head to brush its beak against the blossoms, and the sparks floated higher, drifting skyward until they joined the stars. The climb felt timeless, each step carrying them deeper into stillness. Elion's mind, once full of questions, grew quiet. The hills seemed to ask for no answers, only presence. At last, they reached the crest. The summit was broad and smooth, covered in glowing grass that shimmered like woven silk. From this height, the plains stretched endlessly behind them, silver and lavender under the shifting twilight. Ahead, the horizon glowed faintly with a new color, something warmer, golden, as though dawn rested far beyond sight. In the center of the summit lay a circle of light, etched into the earth itself. Within it rose gentle pillars of stone, each glowing faintly. Together they formed a ring, and within that ring, the air shimmered as though holding something unseen. The lantern-bearer set their lantern in the circle, and its flame joined the glow of the stones. The smaller figure stepped forward, their staff humming softly, while the bird folded its wings in reverence. "This is the threshold of dreams," the lantern-bearer said softly. "Here, the path shifts, not outward but inward. It is the place where the journey turns from seeking to becoming." Elyon felt the truth of those words, though he did not yet fully understand them. He stepped into the circle, and at once, the air around him shimmered like rippling water. For a moment, the world seemed to dissolve, plain, sky, and hill fading into light. He saw himself walking once more, but this time, the steps were endless, leading through forests, across rivers, along ridges of stone. At his side, the smaller figure remained, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, always present. The lantern-bearer's flame never wavered, and the bird's wings cast shade and light alike. Yet the deeper truth was not in the visions, but in the feeling that settled within him. The sense that he was not walking alone, that even in silence, even in uncertainty, the path itself would always hold him. When the vision faded, he stood again within the circle of stones atop the glowing hill. His companion's eyes rested on him, calm and steady. The lantern-bearer lifted their light. "The journey continues," they said, "but tonight you have crossed a threshold. The path will unfold, and in its unfolding, so will you." Elyon nodded. He felt no rush to ask where the path led next, for he understood now that the destination was not what mattered. What mattered was the quiet strength found in each step, in each pause, in each breath of twilight. They stood together upon the hill, the plain stretching behind, the horizon glowing faintly ahead, and as the wind whispered softly through the grasses, Elyon closed his eyes, letting the stillness cradle him, as though the very world were singing him to rest. The wind softened as night deepened, or perhaps it was not night at all, but a deeper shade of twilight. From the crest of the glowing hill, the companions gazed out upon the horizon, where a faint golden shimmer promised a dawn not yet here. The bird gave a long, low cry, not sharp but resonant, as though it were calling to the stars themselves. Its wings stretched wide, glowing faintly, before folding again in stillness. The lantern-bearer lowered their light, and it pulsed steadily, like a heart at peace. The smaller figure sat upon the glowing grass, their staff across their knees, gazing quietly at Elyon. No one spoke for a time. The silence was not empty, but full woven with the hum of the hills, the sigh of the plain below, and the soft rhythm of Elyon's own breath. He felt as though he were no longer simply standing upon the earth, but resting within it, held in its vast and gentle embrace. The lantern-bearer at last broke the silence. "Every path leads to a place of rest," they said. "But rest is not the end, it is part of the journey, as essential as the steps themselves." Elyon listened, letting the words sink into him. His body felt weightless, as though he were both present and drifting. The smaller figure lay back upon the grass, gazing at the constellations that shifted slowly overhead. "The stars move like rivers," they murmured. "If you watch long enough, you see that even stillness flows." The bird lowered itself beside them, great wings folding gently along the ground. It closed its eyes, feathers rising and falling with slow breaths. Its presence was steady and reassuring, a guardian even in slumber. Elyon felt his own eyes grow heavy. The glow of the hill bathed everything in silver and gold, as though they were inside a dream already. He lay down upon the grass, its softness like a bed spun from clouds. The smaller figure shifted closer, and the lantern-bearer set the flame at their side, where it burned low and warm. Above, the sky shimmered with constellations that shifted in endless patterns. Elyon thought he recognized some, the hunter, the river, the bird of flame, but others seemed new, appearing for him alone, symbols of paths yet to come. He did not try to remember them all. Instead, he let them drift across his vision like lullabies written in light. As his breath slowed, he felt the presence of each companion near him. The lantern-bearer's steady flame, a promise that the way would always be lit, no matter how dark the path seemed. The smaller figure's laughter and wisdom intertwined, a reminder that wonder could live alongside strength. The great bird's wings, vast and eternal, sheltering him in silence. And within himself, Elion felt a quiet certainty. He was not the same as when he first stepped onto the forest path. Something within him had opened, not in sudden revelation, but in the gentle unfolding of trust. He did not need to know every step ahead. He only needed to take the next one, and the next after that. The lantern's flame dimmed, not extinguished but softened, as though lowering itself for slumber. The grasses hushed their whispering. Even the stars above seemed to drift slower, their glow thickening like mist. Elion's last waking thought was that he was safe, held by the world itself. And then, with a breath as light as a feather falling, he surrendered to sleep. The dream that followed was softer still. He walked once more along a path, but it was not stone or grass, it was light. Each step glowed beneath his feet, fading gently after he passed. Around him, a horizon stretched without end, painted in hues of dawn and dusk together, endless twilight. The lantern-bearer walked a little behind, their flame resting easily in their hand. The smaller figure skipped ahead, turning often to smile, beckoning him forward. The great bird soared above, wings carrying the sky itself. There was no urgency, no destination to reach. The dream path wound onward, carrying him deeper into calm. It was not a story of endings, but of continuations, each step blending into the next, like the verses of a song. And in the heart of that dream, Elion knew. The journey was eternal, and so was the rest it offered. Every pause, every silence, every gentle breath was part of the path. He walked on, deeper into the dream, the light cradling him like an endless lullaby. And so the hero's journey did not end in battle or triumph, but in peace in the stillness of the glowing hills, where the world itself whispered, "Rest now. You are safe. The path will wait for you." The lantern burned low. The stars drifted softly. The grasses swayed in endless rhythm. And Elion, the quiet hero, slept.